Welcome back to the Angler Journey podcast for another episode of Celebrating Success, Embracing Failure, and Inspiring the Entrepreneur Inside of You. I'm your host, Emily Frenzen, and today I am welcoming Andrew and Alex Ambrose into the studio. These entrepreneurs have had a series of jobs and ventures throughout their lives, but most recently purchased Sehnert's Bakery in McCook, Nebraska. Sehnert's bakeries date back to 1521 in Germany. Eventually, they made their way to the United States, where 10 Sehnert families had bakeries within the U.S. There is one bakery left in McCook, Nebraska, and these two just bought the bakery that is over 500 years old. What a story! And the craziest part of it is that they bought it during a pandemic. So we have lots to talk about today. So Alex and Andrew, welcome to the studio. Let's dive into your story and introduce yourselves. Tell us a little bit about you two.
You said it, we're Andrew and Alex.
Yeah.
We have lived in a couple places over the last 5 years. We got married back in 2016, met each other through the FFA organization, but we currently live in McCook, Nebraska. We've been residents for all of 3 months, and we have 2 little guys. Xander is 3, Isaiah is 1. We bought a bakery, and life is busy, but we're enjoying it.
Yeah. I don't know what more to add to that.
Awesome. Life is busy.
Life is busy.
Yeah, that's awesome. So tell me more about your backgrounds with entrepreneurship. What did you think about entrepreneurship before college maybe, or when did you know that you were entrepreneurs?
I'll go first. I did not think about entrepreneurship before I got to college. So I grew up on our family's farm and ranch, and obviously that was very entrepreneurial, but that wasn't, that was just the norm. And that wasn't something, I never thought about my dad running a business. It was my dad fed cattle, my dad and our family raised crops. Obviously, I knew money was coming from it, but I didn't really think about it until the Angler program presented itself, and we had to write an essay about, I think the question was probably very similar to this: what has your experience been with entrepreneurship? And at that point, I was like, oh, wow, I have been in an entrepreneurial family for my entire life. So thanks to the Angler program, I think I really opened my eyes to all of the work that my parents did, and just the risk that they took and the value they got from that. And so I would say starting freshman year, that's where I kind of realized that it was a thing. I knew it was a thing, but it was a thing in our family.
Totally.
And from the opposite camp, born and raised in Los Angeles, California, and my parents worked for other people for all their lives. And so even when we moved to Nebraska when I was 10, there was still no inkling of what entrepreneurship was. There were business owners, but what did the two really mean? And I conducted myself in a very similar way. And maybe there was some shades of entrepreneurship in there because I was really good at some things in school, but not others. And a lot of that had to do with people rather than the work itself. So really, entrepreneurship didn't make sense until got really deep into the FFA organization and then into college, where the word just kind of circled in some of the groups of people that I was around, but didn't take that seriously probably until about 6 months ago. So that's the only exposure that I had to entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I think what you said is so true of so many entrepreneurs I talk to when they're in school and they're like, oh, I kind of like this, don't love this, or they just don't like school altogether. So it's really interesting to see the way that plays out for different people. But let's talk about 6 months ago when you said that's when I realized, whoa, entrepreneurship is a thing for me. What was that like for you to say, okay, we're going to buy a bakery in the midst of a pandemic?
Well, we had talked about moving into the family business space because, like Alex said, she was born and raised on a family operation, and I always admired that. I felt like as I started to understand rural America more and more, that was one thing that I kind of longed for, and that I felt like I missed out on when I was a kid, is being involved in this family business and learning all of these traits and attributes and understanding so much more about what it takes to be successful. And I just didn't have that. And so as I've gotten to understand that, as we've talked about what we want our family to do and to look like, this very closely aligned with what that vision was. So we had been exploring some potential opportunities toward the tail end of 2020. Nothing worked out.
The bakery was nowhere on the radar, though.
Oh, absolutely not. We were living in Broken Bow. The bakery was in McCook. We had just left McCook a couple years prior, and we wasn't even an option in our mind. And we were exploring some different avenues until I get a text message from Matt Sehnert on a Tuesday evening at 8:29. I'm about to get on a Zoom call at 8:30, and he asked, "Are you ready to quit your 9 to 5 and you purchase a generational family business?" To which my response was, "Ha ha ha, no." But I humored him, and we sent some messages back and forth. I'm on the Zoom call, and Alex and the boys are asleep, and so I'm just kind of having the side conversation. And I never really told Matt no, but I said, "Sure, yeah, I'll tell my wife." I didn't tell my wife. About 36 hours went by, and that Thursday, I think maybe over lunch, I finally brought it up to her. And after she got over how mad she was that I didn't tell her, we had that conversation about what do we do with this, and we were both very seriously entertaining it. We got on a phone call with Matt and Shelley, the previous owners, that weekend, and we make plans to go down to McCook the following weekend, where they spent basically all 3 days trying to convince us not to do it, and they didn't succeed. And I remember looking at my wife at the tail end of that weekend and thinking, "We're going to buy this freaking bakery, aren't we?"
Oh my gosh.
And from that point forward, it was full steam ahead, business planning, financial strategy, conversations about transition, back and forth, and we managed to do it all in about 6 months, which is unbelievable. But it was a serious inflection point when Matt sent me that message on that fateful night in February.
Yeah, memorable for you, it sounds like, for sure.
Well,
Yeah.
a couple things I would add there was, if you listened to our intros, we have no food industry experience, and we enjoy eating food, but no food production, no hospitality, and so us owning a bakery makes zero sense.
Yeah.
It's a multi-generation family bakery. We are not part of that family from a blood sense, and so that also makes no sense. It is in a corner of the state that's 5 hours away from both of our families. Also makes no sense. But we moved to McCook right after we got married and got connected with just the incredible community leaders there, and really fell in love with the community, fell in love with Sehnert's Bakery as we were there, just recognizing that it's truly the heart of the community. And so when Matt texted us that, we would have been silly not to at least pursue the option. And when Andrew says that Matt and Shelley tried to convince us not to, they really did. They told us, obviously we'll never know how difficult it is until you're in it, but they did a really good job at just this is what this means, this is a risk you're taking. And I would say Matt and Shelley are two people, as we've raised our children, we've looked at a couple different families, and we're like, okay, when we get to a point where we need to know what to do, we've got a question about how to raise kids, Matt and Shelley were on that list of what did you do, because we really admired that family while we were there, obviously still do today. So it is pretty surreal to get to think about working alongside Matt and Shelley. Matt, who is head baker, he's stayed on, all of our current staff has stayed on, and so while obviously it's a risk for us to take to do this, we also just feel so supported and would not have said yes had that support not committed to stay and help us figure it out. And we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, I'm just looking at you both, and I'm like, man, it's so crazy to think about both of you being in McCook after being married for a short time, and then never thinking, we're going to buy Sehnert's Bakery in McCook while you're there, and ending back in that community. That is so crazy.
Yeah, never once
Crazy,
on our radar.
dumb, depends on
or fun.
Lots of fun.
Yeah, totally.
Anyway,
it depends on who you ask. It's probably right. That's funny. So what have been some of the hard parts about taking ownership of the bakery?
One of the questions we get a lot is, so Sehnert's Bakery it's a big deal. And I don't say that because it's boastful, because we've had no part in it up to this point. In 2019, they won a James Beard Award, and just for the America's Classic. And so it really is a really incredible spot on the map when it comes to Southwest Nebraska, the state as a whole, the Midwest. And so it's a big undertaking to say that we are part of that and we now own that.
The toughest part was not having any experience. And so at the same time, we're trying to learn how to own and manage a business. We're also learning a brand new industry. We're relearning a community from a different angle than how we previously experienced it. And with that comes a lot of the expectations that Alex talked about, which is like, this is 65 years in one spot, multi-generational, and everybody has their expectations of what Sehnert's ought to be. And now we come in with our own flair, our own ideas for what it could and should be, and managing our own expectations of what we can accomplish in a short time,
right,
and managing the expectations others have of us, and finding a resolve between those two ideas in a way that uplifts our staff, that uplifts the business, that uplifts the community, and continues that tradition that we didn't have a part in, but we know is so vital to the business and the community.
Totally.
And that was one thing as we were talking with Matt and Shelley, I kept equating it to the family farm and thinking about if my dad were to sell our family farm to someone that was not in the family, just the immense weight that I would hope that they would feel. And so taking that on ourselves, just thinking about, wow, there is so much rich history here. And that was one of the things Matt said. He was like, he'd been approached by multiple people to purchase the bakery, but he said, I recognize in you guys that you'll honor tradition and you know what has transpired up to this point to bring it to where it's at. But we also need someone with vision and a drive for innovation that will really honor the tradition, but push this bakery into the next generation. So it's just a small weight on our shoulders, but one that I'm feeling really blessed to be able to have the opportunity for it.
Totally. So what is your why behind buying the bakery? Hearing you say like the challenges that you face with this and that you're going to keep navigating through that, obviously, of like, how do we build this community and how do we bring our new ideas in while like honoring the tradition, and just learning about owning a bakery and having food service experience that you're gaining on the job. Why do all of that?
I equate it to Danny Meyer with Union Square Hospitality Group. That was one of my big kind of like green light, and it made more sense. But the business is more than just the business itself. And so we see and know what Sehnert has contributed to the fiber of the community. And I call it just magic. I mean, when things happen in that bakery, whether it's a concert or a wedding reception or just people reconnecting after 20 years, there's some like residual magic from those conversations and those events that just like creep into the corners of the building. And that's what we want to bottle up and accentuate and bring into every aspect of the business in hopes that it can continue to spill out through the rest of the community.
Wow.
We want to basically copy everything that has created this sense of home inside of the bakery, and we want everybody to walk in, get some, and walk out. And know that there is a place called Sehnert's Bakery and Beer Rock Cafe that they can come and feel like a part of the family. We are not part of the Sehnert family, but we have felt it since the first time we were in that community, that you can walk in and your shoulders release. And that's the kind of place that we want to create in the bakery for our community in McCook, and we found some other people that share that same sentiment. So we're really excited to start to create this model for home.
I think that's super beautiful considering the last 18 months of COVID, and I see so many people craving that in communities as a whole. Yeah.
Amen. I don't know that I have anything much better than that.
That was really beautifully stated, by the way.
It was really good. The one, I guess, from a kind of a technical standpoint isn't the right term, but as I think about moving our family, so we had lived in McCook for the first 2 to 3 years of our marriage. We had our first baby, and we moved to Broken Bow because it was closer to family. And so when I think about when we were contemplating moving back to McCook, that was 5 hours from both sets of grandparents.
Right.
That was 5 hours from aunts and uncles. And growing up on a family farm, I knew that meant my parents would see a lot less of our kids, and I would be on the farm a lot less, which is a huge part of my upbringing. But I think about what what the farm means to me and what family means to me, it is that community. And it is, we moved closer to home, to our hometowns, but moving back to McCook feels like home in a really incredible way. And I think you did a great job at explaining that. So I think that is a large part of the why, is just knowing that it may be further from our hometowns and our families, but we're creating a new home and we're creating new families, our family kind of connections as we move back to McCook. And the bakery is just a really great catalyst to do that. And we've talked about this before as far as what we want our family to look like down the road. There's nothing wrong with working 9 to 5s, but there is a limit. There are boundaries to which you can be moving forward when you're working for someone else. And so as we think about the bakery, we've really talked about it as kind of a vessel. We can do so much within those 4 walls. And so we're really excited, I think, for us to think about what can be done, how we honor what's currently there, and really just maximize using the bakery as a vessel for so much for not only our family, but for those in the community as well.
Yeah. Man, I'm so excited to see what's to come hearing you talk about this in your vision. It's super inspiring. In the context of the business itself, what are some valuable tips that you would give entrepreneurs in this field moving forward? I know you're only, 6 months in.
3 months in.
Or 3 months in, 6 months ago was when, things got rolling. But what would you say from this point right now as far as like changing ownership, buying a business, any advice you have for our entrepreneurs listening?
Yeah, this is not specific to the industry by any means, but Andrew, kind of touched on this a bit earlier. I'm a people pleaser, and so when people come with ideas, they have expectations, and I feel like they're not being met, I'm like, oh gosh, what can we do? What can we do to fix this? And then I take a step back and I'm like, what am I fixing? Am I fixing something that needs fixed? Am I fixing something that someone else expects? And why do they have that expectation? And so for me, it's really just been kind of keeping that in check and knowing what true north is. And when someone comes or someone may say something that makes me feel like they're like potentially not pleased with whatever the situation was, taking a step back and being like, okay, is that something that aligns with what we should and could be changing? And so just keeping my people-pleasing tendency in check has been a big growth point for me over the last few months and will continue to be a big growth point.
Totally. I want to touch on one thing that you said, because True North is something I had never really talked about or knew what that meant until director Tom Field talked about it. So I want to hear how you define True North as a concept and personally in your life as well.
Yeah. I think when you say in business and in personal life as well, like it is very much the same thing for us, or for myself and us as a family. I think it's, just knowing that everything we will experience and everything that we'll seek out to do really is from Christ, and just recognizing that we are stewards of everything He's given us. And so whether it's this business or our family, just thinking about how we can glorify Him in what we're doing. And so, when I think about kind of what my goal is, to get my family to heaven. And so whether that's, I'm getting really emotional, so I'm going to quit talking now. But
Thanks, Alex.
I am not qualified to give advice, other than, I might get sued by Nike for this, but just do it.
Alex is like, oh great, here we go.
I get sued by someone.
Well, I'm just saying. Can I say that out loud without somebody coming to find me and giving me a subpoena?
Oh my gosh.
Anyway, just do it. I am the most risk-averse person that I know, and we just bought a bakery and gave up all possible security.
Yeah.
And I think the only truth that I discovered that made me more confident in doing all of this is asking how confident I am in myself. Will I take a bet on me and trust that either someone else can take care of us because I can go work for them, or do I think I can do this? Do I believe that I have the ability, capacity, and competence to go out and make this bakery, make this business into something that I want it to be. And if I can take that bet, why wouldn't I do that same thing for any other business move or for any other decision that we're going to make? That's been a huge question that we've asked ourselves and that I've asked myself through these first 3 months. And if there's someone out there that's wondering whether or not to jump, ask yourself that question, look in the mirror, and see what your answer is going to be.
Dang, we need a mic drop after that, too. You guys are a power duo, seriously. This is so much good content. I'm impressed.
I don't know about that.
Let's talk more about what it's like being a couple entrepreneurs.
Oh. One thing that I have found early on is just, so I work from home for Vivaic, and so I'm work for someone else 4 days a week, and then Andrew's the bakery full time. And because I am not there all of the time, but I want to be involved in decision making to the level that it makes sense, that's been the biggest balance for us, I think, has been me trusting what Andrew is doing down there and knowing that he'll share what needs to be shared. And then just really, it is a really great exercise of trust. And I thought it was going to be harder. I anticipated it. In the first couple of weeks, I was really trying to wrestle with how much I should be involved. And I still am to some point. But what I found is, it's a lot easier just to trust him. And you haven't proven me wrong yet. So,
no pressure.
But I think it is. It's just, we've been together for almost 10 years. And so knowing what questions to ask to get the information that I need out of him. And then from there, just when you come to me with something, it's recognizing, okay, do you just need to talk? Do you need my input on something? Do you want me to vote on whatever this, decision may be? And so just being really clear with what he's needing from me in conversations as we kind of step into this business ownership realm together, but knowing he's the one doing it full time. So it's a balance that I think we'll try and, it's not a balance, but it's a dance that we're going to continue to do.
Yeah.
And just, we'll figure out our moves as we go.
Yeah.
Boy. I don't know how I top that.
Yeah.
I am an introvert, which is why it is probably more difficult for my wife to pull answers out of me. What we have been wrestling with is how do we keep each other intertwined in the business, right? So now the business comes home. It's ever present and it's always going to be there. And the difficult part is she's still working full time. How do we get her involved? How do we make sure that she's aware, such to the point that we can make decisions that move this business in the direction that we want it to go, and that I'm not just absorbed in whatever the current project is. She's stepped into some other roles too. So every Wednesday, the last month or so, she's been doing cold brew pop-ups where she'll take care of cold brew starting on Sunday or Monday, and brew, and then she'll be there for 3 hours on a Wednesday morning, and then that just means we'll rearrange her work schedule so that she can do her regular 9 to 5. We have a lot of really great aspirations. I call her our volunteer chief marketing officer.
Oh, yeah.
So anybody that has watched our social media, it is 110% because of
Go, Alex.
her. So there are things that, while she can't be ever present, and I know that people pleaser in her is just like aching to want to interact with people, we still want active participation from her and then from myself, and I know that puts the burden on me to make sure that we're translating some of that necessary information. But we're muddling our way through it the absolute best that we can with 3 months worth of experience. So if anybody has tips for us, go ahead and let us know.
That's awesome. Good stuff. I want to hear more about what it was like to say yes to buying a physical space for the bakery during the pandemic. I know that rural Nebraska didn't experience as much as more urban areas did, but we still are experiencing the effects of COVID today. So what was that like when you're thinking about all of this? Was that on your mind, or how did you feel?
Yeah. So I think that early, we got the text from Matt in February of 2021, and I think we were hopeful that we were coming to an end of the pandemic. We had like this second, the Delta variant wasn't out yet, and so it was like, okay, we may find an end, which is really funny to think about because there will never be an end, we're realizing. But I don't think it was something that really crossed my mind. Matt and Shelley had been very upfront with what the pandemic meant to them over the last year and how they pivoted. But because they had been so innovative in how they pivoted, it's a bakery, but then we also do a cafe, like a noon soup salad sandwiches. So they were doing obviously takeout, some delivery, and then they had never done any shipping before, but last Christmas was the first time that they had done any shipping. And so they had that platform set up. There were still some things to figure out, but all the pieces were there that we knew that if this pandemic really did get back to a point where we had to close our doors, we were confident, kind of like you were talking about, we were confident enough in ourselves to know that we would be innovative enough. The hope would be that we would be innovative enough to be able to continue to push forward, whether that was, going all shipping or whatever it may be. So I think that there was enough different avenues that were going on through the bakery, and there's multiple streams of income that are coming through that, and so that was really encouraging to think about. Well, if we needed to shut our front doors, we could ramp up a different portion to be able to be moving forward. So if it only would have been a brick and mortar and there was no shipping set up and there was no, Matt and Shelley just hadn't been innovative in the last year, it would have probably been a much larger red flag than it was. But I think we're confident with a lot of prayer that we could get it figured out.
That's awesome. Super cool.
Second.
Cool. Love that. So lastly, what are the competitive advantages of Sehnert's Bakery? Tell us about the good place in southwestern Nebraska.
500 years of Sehnert family, dating back to Germany. And I mean, there's so many traditions that are wrapped up in that. And for 500 years, the craftsmanship of their product and what they do carried over to America. And 65 years ago, Walt Sehnert started Sehnert's Bakery and created this thing that meant so much to people that's carried on. And enter Matt Sehnert, who grew the business into what it is today. And Matt, being the man that he is, created this sense of community. Mm-hmm. And between Matt and Shelley both, they've cultivated this culture within that business and within the community as they've started to put a really high priority on the development and the well-being of their community, that it's bigger than just the business itself. There are absolute truths that their donuts are the best ever. The bread, the products use as much local food as possible. We have local honey. All of the flour comes from Juanita Roller Mills, which is 45 miles away from the bakery. It's all using local wheat, and it's hard to beat that.
Yeah.
It's a huge competitive advantage. Some of that equipment is twice as old as I am. They're using the same copper pots to make the glass candy and the peanut brittle that they did for 30 plus years.
Wow.
There's so much tradition, but they branded themselves as something familiar with a twist. And that has been a total game changer for something that is so rooted in tradition, but to do it just a little bit differently. Would anybody in McCook, Nebraska ever have eaten a slice of a Granny Smith apple on a sandwich with turkey and provolone? Probably not. Well, let's add bacon and see what happens. And it's been the most popular sandwich at Sehnert's for probably at least a decade.
Wow.
It's that sort of let's take a chance and see what happens. And that's what has turned this business into a James Beard Foundation American classic. And that is why so many people stuck with them through the pandemic, through new concepts, through a folk music listening room. I mean, they have added so many different flavors to McCook just because they were willing to take a chance. And that's exactly what we want to do is bottle up all that magic and make sure it infects every decision we make from this point forward.
Super cool. That's awesome. I said lastly to that question, but I actually have a couple more questions. So we are asking every guest on this season something that the pandemic taught them. So if you were to fill in the blank, the pandemic taught me blank, what would you say?
You can choose how you want your life to be.
Another mic drop.
You can elaborate, or that's...
No, I think I'm going to leave it there. And everybody else can just let those words resonate.
Yeah.
You can choose how you want your life to be.
Super good.
I think for me, similar to that, but around the people, because we were confined to our homes, you decided who you were going to interact with and who you were going to communicate with for that time. And so really just taking a step back and thinking about the people in my life and why they are there and who I was missing and why I was missing them. And then as things opened back up again and we were traveling, and the people that were really worth making sure that we were spending time with, that I think was something that resonated or came from the pandemic, was who really mattered.
Awesome. Super good. So now my last question is, what is a hill that you are willing to die on? This is a fun one, just to get to know you more.
What hill I'm willing to die on? I think the best view in the U.S. is from my parents' front porch looking out National Farms at the golden hour, normally in the fall because it's the best weather. But yeah, as the sun is setting, there's a light breeze, there's some birds chirping. It's hands down the best place in the U.S.
Yeah, so good.
If you listen to this podcast looking for inspiration, that means that you can stop listening, because my answer to this question is much less philosophical than what my wife just said. Because the hill I'm going to die on is that you should never buy store-brand Oreos.
That's awesome.
None less accurate.
Do you want to expand on that?
I do not think we should acknowledge the tasteless filth that is the store-brand Oreo.
Wow.
And that if
you
are going to eat an Oreo,
message.
there is no other way to do so other than with Milk's favorite cookie.
There you go.
Double stuff.
That's a good note to end on, I think. Oh, yeah, good
semantics,
question.
not worth it.
No. It doesn't matter. That's all in the brand.
If it says
It's all
Oreo,
brand.
it's going to be good.
It's good. That's
Fair.
awesome.
That's fair.
Super cool. Well, thanks so much for your time. I am just really encouraged by hearing the goodness that comes when we say yes to things, and I appreciate your honesty in talking about the things that are hard, because there is the reality that when you take risk, there's still things that aren't going to be easy, and it's a journey. That's why we call it the Angler Journey Podcast. So thank you so much for your time and your honesty today. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share with a friend so we can keep building people, building businesses, and building this community. If you listened to this podcast today, I hope that you felt encouraged to start something. Andrew said it best himself: just start. Take the leap. Take the next step.